For a while now, I've been thinking about how I can simplify my artwork. I love designing characters, I love choosing colors, creating outfits, and adding accessories, and filling a design with little details that say something about who that character is. But sometimes I add so much detail that it makes the drawing process a lot harder than it needs to be. A design might feel beautiful as a finished illustration, but if I want to draw a character more than once or eventually animate them, I need to understand parts of the design that are actually important. That's what led me to Lovely Brew's artwork. Lovely Brew has a very recognizable way of drawing pony characters. Their work feels expressive, polished, and also has a sense of simplicity that I really admire. These designs can still have their dramatic hair, interesting markings, accessories, and strong personality without every individual feature becoming overly complicated. So I decided to create a much larger art project based around studying that balance. This project combines three different ideas. First is an artist study of Lovely Brew's visual style that makes their character designs feel recognizable. The second is my personal attempt at simplifying the way I draw design characters and the third is the My Little Pony fusion grid, a popular format where two characters are combined to create a completely new design. Fusion grids are often connected to commissions and adoptables, but I'm using mine differently. I'm not creating these designs to sell. I'm not trying to build a commission batch around someone else's style. This is a learning project. The goal is to study how simple visual language works, experiment with unfamiliar design choices, and eventually take what I've learned into my own art style. You'll probably see these kind of changes after this video comes out with newer projects. Before we get into this project, please make sure to subscribe if you enjoy my character designs, animations, and if you want to see more My Little Pony stuff. Now, let's begin with the artist who inspired this entire experiment. I want to begin by explaining that this is an artist study, not a study of Lovely Brew as a person. I do not know them personally, and I'm not trying to make assumptions about who they are based on their artwork. I'm only discussing visual choices that I've noticed in their public work and why they chose those choices stood out to me. First thing that caught my attention was the way Lovely Brew simplifies Pony's anatomy. The characters are still clearly inspired by the visual language of My Little Pony, but they're not the exact copies of the show or proportions. Their body feels softer and more flexible, and the shapes are adjusted to support the personality of each design. Their ears, eyelashes, eyebrows, and mouth shapes also add a layer of personality to them. None of these individual elements need to be extremely complicated. Instead, the expression comes from how those simple elements are arranged. A slightly raised eyebrow can make the character look confident. A lower lid can make them appear calm, tired, suspicious, or elegant. The direction of the ears can completely change the emotion of a pose. This is something I wanted to prove on in my own work. I sometimes depend on details to make characters look interesting, but studying Lovely Brew's work reminded me that a clear pose and expression can communicate more than layers and layers of decoration. The second major element is the use of shape language. Even when the characters share the same basic pony anatomy, their silhouettes can also feel very different. One character may have a short rounded mane while make them feel more friendly and energetic. Another might have long pointed sections of their hair that makes them feel more dramatic or mysterious. The character with larger wings creates a completely different visual impression from a pony with smaller wings or wings that are tucked in on their side. The shape of the mane is especially important. Instead of treating their hair as hundreds of individual strands, it can be separated into several large sections. Those sections establish direction, volume, rhythm of the hairstyle. Then smaller lines can be added only where they help clarify the form. That creates hair that looks detailed without requiring every strand to be drawn. This is one of the biggest lessons I wanted to take away from this study. Simplification does not mean removing everything interesting. It means deciding which shape carries the design and allowing those shapes to do most of the work. The third thing I noticed is a balance between the character designs and their color palettes. What I'm talking about is that designs don't depend entirely on a bright palette to make it memorable. The main, body, accessories, pose are also creating a clear structure for a pony. Then you add color to strengthen that structure. A dominant color gives the character an immediate identity. Secondary colors support it, while smaller accent colors direct attention towards important areas like the eyes, cutie mark, jewels, wings, or magical effects. When every color is used equally, a design can become difficult to read. Your eyes don't know where they're supposed to look at first. A more controlled color palette creates a visual hierarchy, where there's the main color, like the body, a supporting color, like the mane, and then accent colors that is saved for areas that need the most attention. Lovely Brew's work also shows how much rendering can accomplish without making every surface extremely realistic. The lighting is polished, but it still supports the illustration. Highlights are placed where they help explain the form. Shadows separate overlapping shapes, and softer gradients can add volume without hiding the line work underneath. The balance is important to me because I enjoy rendering. I don't want simplifying my art style to mean that I can never add lighting, texture, or atmosphere again. I want a strong foundation beneath the rendering and to not over-render it in the future. I want the flat design to already work before adding any extra effects. This is an essential reason why I chose first to use Lovely Brew's work for this study. I'm not interested in reproducing everything line for line, and I'm interested in understanding how simplicity, shapes, and expression, color, and rendering work together. Once I understood what I admired about the style, I had to decide how I was actually going to study it. Looking at an artist's work and saying, I like this, is easy. The more difficult part is identifying what you like and turning that observation into a lesson. I started by separating the artwork into categories. I looked at the anatomy, facial features, main shape, line work, color choices, markings, accessories, and rendering. Instead of trying to copy an entirely finished illustration at once, I focused on one decision at a time. For example, I could ask myself, how is this torso being simplified? How many large sections make up the mane? Where does the artist use sharp shapes and where did they use rounded ones? What part of the design received the most detail, and where are the details initially left out? That final question is especially important. When we study artwork, we often focus on what the artist adds. We don't always think about what they chose not to add. As an artist may leave a large section of the body relatively simple so that the face becomes the most important part. They may avoid placing markings in an area because it's already visually busy. They may reduce the number of colors in the mane because the character already has detailed accessories. Those absents are still design decisions. In my own artwork, I have a habit of treating every part of the character as an opportunity to add something. I may add multiple main colors, markings across the body, decorative wings, fabric patterns, gradients, glowing effects, and a complicated cutie mark. I enjoy all those things individually, but when they're placed together, they can begin competing with one another. The character may look impressive in a single illustration, but then having to redraw every one of those choices at different angles becomes the issue. This creates a problem when I'm trying to make character sheets for animations, or I'm trying to create multiple art pieces for my next video. For this project, I began I began asking what I could remove without losing the character. Could two main sections become one? Could a complicated marking become a singular recognizable shape? Could I reduce a palette from 7 major colors down to 3 colors, and very few small accents? Could an accessory be enlarged so I only need one memorable object instead of several smaller ones? Simplifying the design forced me to understand it. When I couldn't decide what to remove, that often meant I had not yet identified the character's most important visual feature. I tried to think of each character as having a visual priority list. The first priority is the silhouette. Even without internal details, does this character have a readable shape? The second is the face and facial expression. Does this character immediately communicate a personality or mood? The third is the main color relationship. Which colors define them? And the fourth is a signature feature. This could be a main shape, a pair of wings, a specific accessory, a marking, or an unusual body type. Everything after that should support the first 4 things. This does not mean additional details are automatically bad. It means that every detail should have a purpose. One of the most interesting parts of this project was discovering that simplicity can actually make the character feel more confident and a lot less busy. When I stopped trying to prove that the design is creative through constant decoration, the strongest choices have room to stand out. A distinctive mane becomes more memorable when it's not surrounded by 10 other equally complicated features. A bright eye color becomes more powerful, and the rest of the palette is more controlled. A cutie mark becomes easier to recognize when it's designed as a symbol rather than a miniature illustration. I also wanted to be honest about the difference between a study and the final style. The pieces in this project may look a lot closer to Lovely Brew's work than my normal drawings, because that's what I'm actively studying right now. I want viewers to be able to see where the inspiration came from, but I do not expect or want my final style to remain as recreations of theirs. The point of this study is to isolate lessons. I might take the simplified anatomy from this project, combine it with the way I normally draw eyes, keeping my preferred rendering methods and introducing shape choices from several other influences. Over time, these decisions will hopefully become something that feels more natural to me, an art style that's not usually created by choosing one artist and deciding to draw that exactly like them forever. It develops through practice, preference, limitation, experimentation, and many different influences. This project is one step in that process. The structure I chose for this study is an MLP fusion grid. For anyone who hasn't seen one of these before, fusion grids begin with a selection of characters placed along the top side of the chart and the first column of the chart. Each square represents a combination of the characters from the row and character from that column. The artist then creates a new design using recognizable elements from both characters. That sounds simple, but there are many ways to approach it. A very direct fusion might divide the designs almost evenly. It could use the body color of one character, the main colors of another character, and place both of their cutie marks together. That method makes the parents of the fusions very easy to recognize, but it can sometimes feel more like 2 designs placed on top of each other than one complete character. More interpretive fusions focus on visual ideas. Instead of copying both hairstyles, the artist might create a completely new mane shape that combines the movement of one and the textures of the other. Instead of placing 2 cutie marks beside each other, they might design a new symbol based off of the meaning of both cutie marks. The species can also become part of the decision. What happens when an earth pony is combined with a Pegasus? Does the fusion automatically become a Pegasus? Could they remain an earth pony but inherit feather-like markings? Could their talents represent both characters without literally combining their anatomy? There's no single correct answer. It kind of just comes down to personal preference as an artist. And that freedom is one of the reasons fusion grids are such an effective way to do an art challenge. They give the artist a clear starting point while still requiring original decisions and ideas. Fusion grids are also commonly used for adoptables and commissions. As an artist can prepare the grid, allow clients to claim individual spaces, then create a custom fusion based on that pairing. Examples in the My Little Pony community show grids being used as both personal design challenges and commissions or adoptable batches. I understand why that format is extremely popular. The client can see two characters that will inspire the design, but the final result is something that can still surprise people. The grid also turns a collection of commissions into a connected project. Every design is different, but they all belong to the same larger presentation. There's also a community element. People can compare the different combinations, choose their favorite squares, and suggest pairings, or follow the grid as it's gradually completed. However, the purpose for my grid is different. I am not selling any of these fusions. I'm not offering them as adoptables, and I'm not using Lovely Brew style as a way to advertise commissions. This project is focused specifically on practice. This difference matters because there is a distinction between studying another artist and building a commercial product around and imitating their work. Even when the character combinations and individual designs are my own, the visual style is still way too closely connected to another artist's recognizable work. And I think that's important to be transparent about all of that. I don't want someone to see one of these pieces and assume I invented a completely different visual approach on my own. That's why I'm crediting Lovely Brew as the inspiration and describing the project as a style study. The fusion grid also gives me a useful way to test whether I'm actually learning anything. If I only drew one character, I might accidentally memorize a few surface level features. I could repeat a particular eye shape or hair and convince myself I understood the style. A large grid forces me to adapt to those lessons in many different characters. I have to draw different body types, personalities, species, color, manes, and expressions while still keeping the collection visually consistent. That's what made this project a lot more difficult. In each fusion, I began studying the two original characters separately. I make a mental note of the features that make each one of them recognizable. That might include their species, body color, mane shape, eye color, cutie mark, personality, species ability, outfit, or general mood of their design. When I separate these features into two categories, the first category is visual information. These are the things I can directly see, like colors, shapes, markings, wings, horns, accessories, and proportions. The second category is character information. These are the ideas behind the designs, like confidence, kindness, chaos, elegance, whatever else defines the original characters. A good fusion should not only look like the characters, it should feel like those two characters could naturally become one new personality. After making a list, I chose a dominant influence. Even when I wanted the fusion to feel balanced, one character usually needs to establish the main structure. For example, one character might provide the body type and the silhouette, while the other influences the colors and smaller details. This prevents the design from becoming too visually divided down the middle. Once I have a silhouette, I move into the color stage. Instead of automatically combining every color from both characters, I create a limited palette. I usually choose one dominant color family and one secondary family and smaller accents. The colors can be a mix directly. They can also be reinterpreted. Bright blues, bright reds do not necessarily need to become purple. One could become one color, the body color, while the other one appears more in the eyes or the cutie mark or in the mane. Alternatively, both could be softened or shifted so they feel more part of the same palette. When I look at Lovely Brew's palette, they use a lot of pastel colors, so I wanted to lean more into the softer and lighter color palettes for most of these designs, even though I know some of them are going to have a couple harsher tones to them. The goal is not mathematical accuracy, the goal is visual harmony. This was one of my favorite parts of designing the pony characters because it requires an entire idea to be reduced into a small symbol. For fusions, I do not want this to simply place both original cutie marks side by side. Instead, I look for a shared meaning. Like if one pony has a star as a cutie mark and the other one has a moon, I might make a star surrounded by the phases of the moon, which I think makes it visually interesting. The symbol should suggest both inspiration while still belonging to the new character. The face comes near the end of the design process. Because I'm studying Lovely Brew's work, I'm experimenting with simpler face construction and more controlled expressions. I want to see how much personality I can communicate through the eyes, the brows, the ears, and mouth without adding unnecessary facial details. This is another reason the fusion format is helpful. Different combinations call for different expressions. One fusion might feel energetic, mischievous, another might be elegant and reserved, another might look powerful but gentle. The facial construction can remain consistent while the expression makes characters feel individual. Finally, I add the rendering. I try to keep the lighting controlled to enhance the larger shapes rather than covering them. I add shadows where forms overlap, like in the back leg you see, or in the like underneath the hair. This is probably the stage where I have to restrain myself the most. I enjoy adding extra effects, extreme renderings, and making all the little accessories and details extremely detailed. But for this project, I'm trying to stop when the rendering supports the character instead of becoming part of the character. Whenever an artist publicly studies another person's style, there is an important conversation about inspiration and imitation. I don't think artists learn in isolation. Almost everyone begins by looking at artwork they admire and asking how it was made. We study animation, comics, games, movies, paintings, and other artists in our community. The problem is not simply being influenced. The problem comes when someone hides the influence, copies specific artwork, and traces work without permission. Recreating another artist's characters or presents a closely imitation as though it was entirely original. That's why context matters. My designs in this project are my own combinations and interpretations, but the style study is intentionally based off of Lovely Brew's artwork. I'm not trying to hide this connection, though I feel like I could have been a little bit more clear in some of the shorts that I've made, but I did want this video to be a full-length explanation of what I was doing, and the shorts were to show off my art project. I also do not plan to rename this style as my own or after finishing the grid. Instead, I want to evaluate this project and decide which lessons genuinely improve my process. Maybe the simplified legs and make posing easier. Maybe larger mane shapes help me animate hair more consistently. Maybe reducing the number of markings make characters easier to remember. A study does not need to end with me adopting everything. Sometimes learning what another artist's choices helps you understand why you prefer something different. At the end of the project, I wanted to divide what I learned into 3 groups. The first group was the lessons I wanted to keep. These might include stronger silhouettes or simplified anatomy. The second group will be ideas I want to change. I may adopt a simplified feature, but redraw it using my own color palette or eye shape. And the final group will be things I leave behind. These are choices that work beautifully for Lovely Brew's art style, but don't feel natural in my own process. The separation is how the study becomes useful beyond this one collection. The final goal was to not people look at my future art and immediately say, "Oh, that looks exactly like Lovely Brew." The goal is for my future characters to be clearer, more expressive, easier to draw, and more manageable to animate. Lovely Brew's work is a starting point for this experiment, but not the final destination of my art. This project was much larger than simply drawing a collection of pony fusions. This is an opportunity for me to study another artist's decision, challenge the habits of my own artwork, and learn how to simplify without removing personality. Lovely Brew's art inspired me because it demonstrates that a character can feel polished and expressive without every feature becoming complicated. The Fusion Grid gives me a way to practice these lessons across many different designs. By keeping the project non-commercial and being open about the inspiration, I can focus on what this was meant to be, an educational experiment. I do not expect every fusion to work perfectly. Some designs may feel more successful than others. I may have reached the end of the grid and realized that my approach has completely changed from where I began. And honestly, I hope it does. A large art project should reveal progress. The first design and the final design do not need to look identical. I want to be able to see where I became more confident and where I stopped overcomplicating shapes, and where my own preferences began to return to the artwork. This is probably the part I was most excited about. I'm not only creating a grid of new characters, I'm documenting the process of rebuilding the way I think about character designs. I still love detailed artwork. I still love dramatic colors, magical effects, and complicated illustrations. But simplifying doesn't mean abandoning those things. It means building a character that does not need to depend on them. Once the foundation works, I can choose when additional details make the image stronger instead of adding details because I was afraid of the design looking unfinished without it. Thanks to Lovely Brew for creating amazing artwork that inspired me to look more closely at my own art process, and thank you for watching my work through this experiment. Please remember that these pieces are studies. Lovely Brew's original artwork should be viewed and supported through their own pages, and their work should not be reposted without permission and credit. I will post links to their channel in the description. Let me know which fusion is your favorite. And if you enjoy seeing character designs, character studies, more My Little Pony art, maybe some animation, and some longer creative projects like this, please subscribe and follow me for more artwork. And I'll see you guys in the next video.